Some racing categories are very closely associated with certain countries. For Germany you have DTM, for the UK it's the British Touring Car Championship, whilst in the US you have IndyCar and NASCAR. Of course for Australia it's the Supercars Championship, or as it used to be known as the V8 Supercars. All of these series have a greater connection to their respective countries because 1. A lot of the drivers/teams are from said country, the series itself was founded and is still run in said country, and also the series very rarely deviates from its quote-unquote home nation or continent. However, sometimes a series will look to expand its global outreach, and this can be done via holding races in a completely different country to the norm, whether that be an exhibition or a points-paying race. And this is the subject of today's video. The Supercars Championship has raced in places outside of its homeland of Australia and New Zealand before. It's had tenures in China, Yas Marina and Bahrain. However, I feel they're not particularly well remembered events, and it doesn't help that all of those events lasted around a couple of years. However, in 2013, a new market was about to be tapped into. It's Austin, Texas, and the sound-bending noise of thunderous V8 saloon cars pelting their way around the Circuit of the Americas was about to begin. V8 Supercars' first trip to North America. This, as an idea, isn't just a case of simply, "Hey, look at us, we're racing in the USA, guys, let's go and have some fun." There were some very legitimate reasons to do this. Obviously, America is an important market for the series. These types of cars, with the type of racing they produce, fit in well with the American viewer. Plus, the series had started to gain a greater stronghold in the country when Mike Joy and Darrell Waltrip visited Australia to commentate on the Bathurst 1000 a few years prior. Also, the majority of cars on the grid would bear a similar resemblance to the ones the Americans would find in their local Nissan, Mercedes and Chevrolet, Holden's US counterpart, dealership. So a trip to the country wasn't just done willy-nilly. Like I said earlier, this was being held at the Circuit of the Americas, a brilliant track to demonstrate these cars, as well as one that would provide some entertaining racing. Although they weren't using the full F1 circuit. No, they would be using the shortened layout, one where you dive off to the left as you go through what would be a long sweeper through turn 6, before rejoining the main track onto the straight leading up to F1's turn 12. The event was called the Austin 400, and the format would be the following: 4 races of 100 kilometers. Simple as that. I'm not going to reveal who won the races because otherwise the incentive for you to watch these races without an irritating voice talking over the footage, i.e. me, is reduced, as you would know who is victorious. When it came to the races themselves, they were an entertaining watch. However, to be honest, that is not a surprise whatsoever. V8 Supercars are known for creating some spectacular racing, with regular passing and fender mangling. The track did lend itself well to that though. It's one of the wider circuits that the series visited that year, so instead of saying, if you give a V8 Supercar driver an inch, they'll go for a mile, it should more be like, if you give a V8 Supercar driver 20 feet, then they'll go for the entire width span of America. Now the only issue that this track did have was when it came to the tarmac runoff areas. As COTA has lots of asphalt you're not meant to utilise, the race organisers stated specifically that the racing had to be confined to within the white lines, and that the drivers couldn't force another driver off onto the runoff to make a pass. It was probably the fairest thing to do in the circumstances, however it is a bit frustrating for that to be something that had to be considered. I mean, it's not something you would see at Bathurst, Sandown, Winton and other venues on the calendar, for example. On the whole though, it was typical V8 Supercar racing, which usually never misses a beat. The racing though isn't the challenging part. Obviously it's a very important element if you want to keep fans engaged, however, like I said, the exciting racing almost comes naturally for this series. The difficult part is making sure this is an event that could be a mainstay on the calendar, an event that would be looked forward to, an event that in some capacity would have the awe of being one of the must-see events every season. And the fact that this only lasted 1 year sadly doesn't surprise me. Now, the reason this didn't last beyond 2013 was because of scheduling conflicts with the X Games, who would be having their 2014 event around the same time as the V8 Supercars had their event in 2013 at COTA. When it came to 2015 though, the contract between the Circuit of the Americas and V8 Supercars was terminated, with economic reasons stated as the main cause of this termination. This obviously isn't a huge surprise. Given that a single round of the championship was occurring there, it would have had to have been a monstrous success to have been a mainstay. And whilst it was deemed a success at the time, it obviously wasn't successful enough to make sense going back there. However, I think there were ways that this event could have been more successful. For me, the format and track combination just wasn't exciting enough on paper to be considered as a must-see event. Whilst when put into practice the action on track was pretty good, I think a different track with a format similar to that perhaps of the Gold Coast 600 would make for a more interesting watch on the surface of things. Events which consist purely of sprint-style races don't tend to have a legacy as great as events which have one or two longer races. Also, I think a different track may have also helped. Laguna Seca, Portland, or even Long Beach perhaps, would have made for venues which perhaps would have whetted the appetite more than the Circuit of the Americas does, particularly for a special trip to the country. Also, I'm not saying that because I have anything against COTA, because I think it works brilliantly for Formula 1 and indeed for the World Endurance Championship when they've raced there. Also, I think another thing that would have helped this event would be a wildcard entry with an American driver, or at the very least a driver who competes in either NASCAR, IndyCar or IMSA racing at that event. Yes, that would potentially mean extra cost in a team supplying an extra car for just one round of an already expensive trip. Also, I do see the point of, well, we only want to showcase our homegrown drivers to the American public, not have a name everybody recognises in another series spoiling their limelight. However, I think it would have helped generate more headlines, fans and interest for the event. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if the series had the likes of Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Marco Andretti or Tony Kanaan competing at the race? This event by no means was a disaster. 68,000 fans went over to the Circuit of the Americas for the 3 days of action. However, the fact that this seems to have been mostly forgotten about shows how little of an impact this event has had on people's memory banks. Although, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. What do you think the V8 Supercars should have done on their trip to the States? Keep the same format and same track? Or just throw away the drawing board and start a completely different idea on a blank canvas? Say your thoughts in the comment section down below. However, until the next video, enjoy the rest of your day.